Boston College has won just 7 games 5 of the past 6 years. But can they break the trend in 2019? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
It's practically common law by now. Boston College would win 7 games each year under Steve Addazio. Even last year, when they were 7-2 with 3 games remaining, Boston College dropped those last 3 games to finish 7-5 before their bowl game against Boise State was canceled due to weather. Had they lost that bowl game, they would have finished 7-6 for the 5th time in the past 6 seasons. But maybe Boston College can break the trend in 2019. They returned 6 starters on the offensive side of the ball, which is a rarity for the Eagles. This is one of the strongest offenses we will see under Steve Addazio during his time with the Eagles. They returned Anthony Brown, a very good quarterback that had 20 touchdowns and just 9 interceptions last year and can be a bit of a dual-threat quarterback himself. He did battle some injuries, so his number could have been a little bit better in 2018, but if he can stay healthy, expected to have a breakout year for the Eagles. The same goes for AJ Dillon, one of the best running backs not just in the ACC, but in the entire nation when he is healthy. Last year he rushed for over 1,100 yards, and that included 2 games that he missed. So he missed 2 games and battled an ankle injury for most of the season and was still able to put up over 1,100 yards on the ground. So this time, if they can stay healthy, if these 2 guys can stay healthy, if the offensive line can stay healthy, Boston College will be a threat on offense. Usually, when it's the other way around, their defense is their strength and the offense is the one that struggles. This year, the defense returns just 3 starters, but under Steve Addazio, I would expect them to remain strong as always. Over the past 4 seasons, Boston College has allowed just an average of 22.2 points per game. So even with 3 returning starters, I would expect those numbers to stay about the same. And those leaders on the defense, with only 3 returning starters, will be Max Richardson and Isaiah McDuffie, who will lead a fairly strong core of linebackers. So this Boston College team has the potential to break free of their curse and win more than 7 games under Steve Addazio. But they open up the season against a very tough Virginia Tech team. Luckily for the Eagles, they do host this game at home. It is at home. But Virginia Tech, even though they lost to Boston College last year by 10 points, is a completely different team. Last year was a horrible year for the Hokies and Justin Fuente. Battled some injuries. Josh Jackson went down early in the year. Their defense was nothing compared to what we've seen under Bud Foster over the past 2 decades. But this year is going to be completely different. They returned 10 starters on the defensive side of the ball. This could be one of the best defenses in the entire ACC. With one of the best defensive coordinators in the entire nation with that much returning experience, you better watch out for this Virginia Tech defense. They also returned 6 starters on offense and their quarterback. Josh Jackson gone to Maryland. Ryan Willis, who filled in for him after his injury, played fairly well in my opinion. And now with a whole other offseason of practice under his belt, he has got the starting job for the Hokies. And I think Virginia Tech, with this much experience coming back, I think they go on the road and get a key win over Boston College to start off 1-0 in ACC play. So a horrible start to the Eagles season, especially in a year that they do have high hopes, but it's just the way it's going to be. I think Virginia Tech will come on the road and take care of business. I think this defense is going to be very dominant under Bud Foster. And then, after a win over Richmond, Boston College does play 2 Power 5 opponents. But Boston College was smart. They chose 2 of the worst Power 5 opponents, and Kansas, arguably the worst team in the Big 12, and Rutgers, arguably the worst team in the Big 10. I'm projecting wins over both of these squads. Kansas, yes, will be led by Les Miles, which is a very intriguing storyline. I think he will sooner rather than later, turn around this Kansas program and get them back to bowl eligibility. Whether or not that's in 2019 remains to be seen. But Boston College also does get to host the Jayhawks, and I think they take pretty easy care of them in Week 3. Then they go on the road to Rutgers, and I think they take easy care of them. Unless Artur Sitkowski makes some major strides forward, this Boston College defense should be able to swallow up this Rutgers Scarlet Knights offense. And then offensively, I would expect the same thing. I think with this talented offense that Boston College has, they take care of Rutgers. This is a much bigger game for Chris Ash and the Scarlet Knights than it is for the Eagles. But I don't think it matters. I think Boston College is able to go on the road, not too far down the road, and get a quality win over a Power 5 opponent. And then they get back into ACC play, facing off against Wake Forest. Last year, AJ Dillon on the road against the Demon Deacons had 185 yards on the ground. And there's a very good chance that he could do that again, if not better, against a team that returns just 5 starters on the defensive side of the ball and last year allowed an average of 193 rushing yards per game. So unless Dave Clawson and this Demon Deacons defense figured something out, AJ Dillon could be poised for another big-time game against the Demon Deacons, and I think they get a win over Wake Forest at home to get back to 500 in ACC play. That's going to be a quality win, and now Boston College is 4-1. That loss to Virginia Tech at the beginning of the season is an afterthought. Then they go on the road to Louisville. The last time Boston College was at Louisville, A.J. Dillon went off 272 yards on the ground for A.J. Dillon the last time they faced off against Louisville. And that was still with Lamar Jackson, I should add. This year they bring in Scott Satterfield from Appalachian State to kind of take command of the Cardinals and try to turn them around after an embarrassing 2-10 season last year where they really just were not competitive whatsoever. This game, though, could be fairly low scoring. We talked about how well we think the Boston College defense will be despite losing so many starters. Louisville returns 10 starters on the defensive side of the ball. And I expect this Louisville team to be much more competitive this season than they were last year. You might not see that improvement in the win column, but you will see it in terms of their effort in the final score. Regardless of that, though, Boston College has too much talent, has too much consistency across the board. They go on the road and get a win against the Cardinals. They are now 5-1. Going into their bye week, they come back and face off against North Carolina State, still at home. Last year, Boston College lost to North Carolina State by 5 points, a game they nearly won, should have won. 2 years ago, in 2017, they lost to North Carolina State by 3 points. They are due a win against the Wolfpack, and it will come in 2019. North Carolina State loses their star quarterback and Ryan Finley and have a lot of key pieces to replace on the offensive side of the ball. They lose their top 2 wide receivers. Both were 1,000-yard receivers last year. They lose their top rusher, who was an 1,000-yard rusher last year. So a lot of offensive pieces they're going to have to replace. The defense will probably be the strength for North Carolina State, at least early on in the season before Matt McKay and that offense can start to figure things out. But regardless, after a week of rest, after suffering 2 very close losses the past 2 years against the Wolfpack, I think Boston College gets a win, and boom, they have clinched bowl eligibility, and they have a 6-1 record. So you can bet your money Boston College will be ranked top 20 by this point. At least we would assume. But then look at this second half of the schedule. If you take a look at Boston College's schedule, all 12 games, you realize that Boston College has to take advantage of the first half of the schedule because the second half is absolutely brutal. The first half, they get to face off against Richmond, Kansas, Rutgers, Louisville, teams like that. Their first 7 games are very winnable. Their final 5, not so much. At Clemson, the defending national champions. At Syracuse, a team that won 10 games last year. Florida State, a team that's going to be much improved. At Notre Dame, a team that made the college football playoff last season. And then on the road against Pittsburgh, a team that made the ACC title game last year, won the Coastal Division. At Clemson for Boston College. Boston College is one of the few teams that gave Clemson a respectable outing last year, gave them a respectable fight, only losing to the Tigers by 20 points. And if you remember last year, Boston College hosted College Game Day. Anthony Brown went down with an injury fairly early on in that game. Their defense held their own and shut down what was one of the best offenses in the nation, held them to just 27 points. So there is hope for the Eagles, but with it being on the road at Death Valley and with this offense being so much more improved for the Clemson Tigers, I don't see anybody beating them in the regular season. Boston College loses on the road to the Tigers. And another thing I should mention, on top of everything I just analyzed about their schedule, 4 of their final 5 games are on the road, which is brutal for the Eagles. Back on the road to Syracuse, a team that did win 10 games last year. As I mentioned, yes, they lose Eric Dungy, but Tommy DeVito is the real deal. We saw him come into play last year when Eric Dungy was out with injury from time to time. By this point in the season, by November, he's going to be slinging it like he's the second coming of Eric Dungy. So I don't think Boston College is going to be able to go on the road and get a win at the Carrier Dome. This Syracuse team all the way around could very well win 8 or 9 games again in 2019. And this defense for Syracuse, everybody talks about their offense under Dino Babers. This defense is extremely tough. So Boston College, unfortunately, loses another one on the road against Syracuse, both who are very good teams, Clemson and Syracuse. They come back home to face off against Florida State, a team they should have beat last year. Lost 22-21. Punted the ball, I think, on 4th and 1, and then Florida State had an 87-yard touchdown pass down 21-16 to win that game by just 1 point. And imagine if they won that game, they would have won 8 games, and we could stop talking about the 7-win curse that the Boston College has. But Florida State this year is a completely different Florida State team than they were last year. And keep in mind, the fact that Florida State was able to win last year makes me believe that they'll definitely be able to win in 2019 because this Florida State team returned 16 starters, finally has their quarterback in James Blackman, and if they can stay healthy, will be a major threat in the ACC Atlantic. No, they will not beat Clemson, but they could very well challenge for that number 2 spot in the division. I think they come on the road and defeat Boston College on their home turf. So 3 straight losses for the Eagles. A bye week going into the Notre Dame game, a team that made the college football playoff last year, a team that returns their star quarterback in Ian Book. You get where I'm going with this. Another loss for Boston College, and I don't mean to overshadow this game or just kind of push it away, but Notre Dame, people say every year that they're overrated, and 9 times out of 10 they continue to prove them wrong. People criticize their maybe lack of strength of schedule because they were an independent. But this year they play on the road against Georgia, Michigan, and Stanford, and play a handful of other ACC teams. Maybe they can't win the big games, but they will beat the Boston College Eagles. Another loss for BC. And they close out the year on the road against Pittsburgh. They have not played at Pittsburgh since 2004, which is extremely hard to believe. But Pittsburgh's defense will be the key in this one. They return 5 starters on offense, including their quarterback in Kenny Pickett. You remember him. He was the one that led the big-time upset over Miami a few years ago. Didn't have the best of years in 2018, but if he gets things rolling in year 2 as full-time starter for Pittsburgh, they could be dangerous and maybe compete in the ACC Coastal once again, which to me is very, very wide open. But even though they lose their top 2 rushers, even though they might not be one of the elites in the Coastal, I think Pittsburgh does get a win over BC to close out the year. And that's not what Boston College fans want to hear. But down on themselves, losing 4 games in a row. Pittsburgh usually does play well towards the end of the season. We've seen that the past 2 years under Pat Narduzzi. I'm giving Boston College a loss here. And the streak does end, in the regular season at least. I have the Boston College Eagles finishing 6-6 in the regular season. That, of course, will be good enough to go to a bowl game. And if they win that, they will be 7-6. And that would be 6 of the past 7 years they do win 7 games. But right now, 6-6, they have to take advantage of this first half of the schedule. Maybe they do get the job done against Virginia Tech. Maybe they do pull off a win at home against Florida State or on the road against Pittsburgh. But right now, I think 6-6 is the most realistic bet for the Boston College Eagles in this very, very talented offense. Steve Addazio, he's a heck of a coach, but he's got to learn to get over the hump. Maybe they can do it and prove me wrong, but right now I think 6-6 is the best bet for Boston College, and unfortunately that streak may remain alive. So guys, as always, thank you for watching. Check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert. Check out our website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for our newsletter. Sign up for our expert picks. I promise you, you are not going to want to miss out on any of that. And guys, as always, thank you for watching here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time here on The Gridiron Expert.